What's up guys, Mr. Audio here, and welcome back to another video. If you haven't already, please make sure you're subscribed, and while you're down there, why don't you smash the notification bell so you never miss another video. Alright, before we get into this video, I do want to mention that we just recently set up a Discord where you can ask all your music production related questions, and even get private feedback on your mixes from me, and also suggest some video content for me to cover here on YouTube. Alright, that being said, let's get right into this video here. Alright, so this video is about the 5 biggest mixing mistakes I see people make everywhere. Number 1, and that's balancing your mix in mono. Now I've even seen a few videos out there saying hit that mono button for a tighter mix. Well, this can be true, it's not the balancing you should be doing in mono. Because what mono is the left plus the right divided by 2. So if you have something that's just on the left side or something that's just on the right side, it's going to be halved in volume. You'll see about a 6 decibel reduction in volume. Now, that's a significant dip, which is normal. So, if you have, for instance, a rock song with one guitar performance on the left and one guitar performance on the right, granted they're playing the same thing, they're still going to be reduced in volume about half. Now, if you go in there and start messing around with faders, turning things up, turning things down until you get a nice balanced mix in mono, then when you flip that back to stereo, you're going to be very disappointed in what happened. Because everything on the sides is going to be twice as loud. So those guitars that were already big and booming and screaming, they're going to be even bigger and boomier and more screaming. They're going to drown everything else out. And that's because you decided to balance your mix in mono. Don't be mixing for that 2% of people that listen to music on mono systems. Mix for the 98% of the world that listens on stereo or better. We'll just call, spatial audio better. Mono is very useful for other things, like seeing if you have any frequency masking, such as overlapping instruments that is creating maybe a muddiness in your mix. If you hit that mono button, it'll show which frequencies are masking. You'll be able to hear it plain as day. Hitting the mono button can also reveal if you have any phasing issues. This is caused by 2 identical or very similar waveforms canceling each other out due to not being time aligned properly. Now, I go over the do's and don'ts about mixing in mono in another video. I'll link it up here. You can watch it at your leisure. Moving on to number 2, too much compression. I see people putting compressors on everything without even really thinking about why they're compressing it. Compression is meant to shorten the dynamic range of an audio file. Now, not everything needs compression. If you have really thick, screaming, distorted guitars, chances are that waveform isn't going to have too much of a dynamic range. There might not be much to compress there. So throwing a compressor on it might not only give you some unwanted distortion, it might make it sound smaller. And that might be the case with some really big fat synths too. So be careful of what you're putting compressors on. Think about what you're compressing and why you're doing it before you do it. Number 3, vocals too quiet. This happens all the time, whether it be lack of confidence, embarrassment, or maybe you just don't like the sound of your own voice. The vocals have to be at a certain level. If people wanted to listen to instrumentals, they'd be listening to instrumentals. Too many times, artists will be in the studio with me telling me, hey, can you turn my vocals down just a little bit? Can you turn them down just a little bit more? At some point, the beat or the instrumental is going to be way overpowering the vocals, and that's not what we want. Let the vocals carry the lead of the song. Think about it this way. If you could only make out 50% of what the artist is saying, are you going to stick around on that song too long? Probably not. So keep the vocals at the appropriate volume, alright? Don't ruin the song by having too quiet of a vocal performance. That's pretty much all I got to say about this one. 4. Now this one's weird. I see a lot online about subtractive EQ and how it's the holy grail of EQs. Well, with digital parametric EQs, that's just not the case. Boosting and cutting does the exact same thing to the audio file. It doesn't matter, alright? It's just what is better in the situation you're in. Is it easier to just boost that one band and get the character of those frequencies, or is it easier to cut everything else around it? This is situational dependent, and it's just a workflow thing. It is not like analog hardware. Now, analog hardware adds harmonic character when boosting frequencies. There's also analog emulation plugins that react the same way. When you're boosting frequencies on a character adding EQ, this is called additive EQ. Boosting and cutting is fun, all right? Basically, if you're using a digital parametric EQ, it's situational dependent. Which is easier? Is it easier to boost this one frequency, or is it easier to cut all of these frequencies, or vice versa? Is it easier to just cut this one frequency, or is it easier to boost all of these? It can be done either way. It doesn't really matter. But if you're using analog emulations or analog hardware, this is where you get into adding harmonic distortion to that audio performance. Now, this is a mixing decision that a lot of people make all the time, but to say that you should never boost and only cut is just flat out wrong. Boost away, cut away, do whatever's easiest. Just remember, what you're doing it with matters. Like for instance, a stock EQ. This will do the same thing boosting or cutting, it doesn't matter. But if you get like a Pultec emulation, that's gonna add some harmonic character to the performance. So think about this when you're using EQ to either boost or cut. Number 5, and that is putting too many plugins on the master bus. I've gotten mixes where I've actually asked what was on the master bus because it just sounded so squashed and overprocessed and distorted, and I ended up calling them to ask them to take all the plugins off, and then the mix just completely fell apart. This is probably because they watched a video on top-down mixing. This is a method where if you have a lot of experience in mixing, you can load up a template with all of your favorite plugins, with preset settings, kind of based on experience, you know, which a lot of beginners don't have that experience. So they're mixing into this, not really knowing what they're doing, and it's causing some disconnect from the learning aspect of it. Me, I've been mixing for 16 plus years now, and to be honest with you, I don't have anything on my master bus. I let the mastering engineer do that. I don't even mix with the limiter. I just make sure it's quiet enough so that it's not going to be clipping when I export the file. I give the mastering engineer plenty of headroom to do this. All right, so think about all the plugins you're adding before you add them to the master bus. Don't add them blindly, all right? Think about what you're doing, because every move that you make on the master bus, you're doing to each individual track. If you use EQ to boost a certain frequency, 2 dB, you're boosting that frequency on every track by 2 dB. It's adding a lot of EQ to it. So really think about what you're doing on the master bus. Mastering involves a lot of little changes, not big changes. You shouldn't be mixing into compressors and EQs and limiters so hard at the mixing stage. Well, that's it for this video, guys. If you stuck around till the end, go download the free Ableton Master Rack. I'll leave the link down in the description, and come hang out with us on Discord, all right? It's a lot of fun. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Mr. Audio, out.